In 399 BCE, one of the greatest minds in history stood before a jury, not to defend a crime of violence or treason, but to defend his ideas. His name was Socrates, a philosopher who never wrote a single book, never founded a school, and yet shaped the foundation of Western thought. Socrates was born in Athens around 470 BCE. He was known for wandering the city barefoot, engaging citizens in deep conversations. He asked questions that exposed contradictions, challenged assumptions, and forced people to think. This method, now called the Socratic method, was revolutionary, but it also made him enemies. He described himself as a gadfly, stinging the sluggish horse of Athens to keep it awake. But after decades of war, political upheaval, and cultural anxiety, the city had grown tired of being stung. The trial didn't happen in a vacuum. Athens had just lost the Peloponnesian War to Sparta. The democracy had collapsed, replaced by the brutal regime of the 30 tyrants, some of whom, like Critias, had once been students of Socrates. Though Socrates had no formal political role, his association with these figures made him suspicious. He was seen as a threat to tradition, a man who questioned the gods, the laws, and the very fabric of Athenian society. In this tense climate, 3 citizens, Miletus, Anytus, and Lycon, brought formal charges against him. Socrates was accused of 2 crimes: asabeia, impiety against the gods of Athens, specifically failing to acknowledge the gods the city acknowledges, and introducing new deities, corruption of the youth, by teaching them to question authority, tradition, and morality. These weren't physical assaults, but they were seen as assaults on the soul of the city. In Athens, religion and civic duty were intertwined. To challenge the gods was to challenge the state. And Socrates didn't help his case. He refused to beg for mercy. He refused to flatter the jury. Instead, he defended philosophy itself. Before we hear his defense, it's worth asking, what made Socrates so dangerous? His greatest contribution wasn't a theory, it was a method. He believed that truth could be reached through dialogue, by asking probing questions that exposed contradictions. This became known as the Socratic method, and it's still used today in law schools, classrooms, and debates. Socrates also challenged the idea that knowledge was about facts. He said wisdom begins with recognizing one's own ignorance. He questioned the nature of justice, virtue, and the soul, not to give answers, but to teach people how to think. He didn't claim to be wise, he claimed to be curious. And that curiosity, in a city wounded by war and craving certainty, was seen as subversive. Socrates' defense is preserved in Plato's Apology. It's not an apology in the modern sense, it's a bold, unapologetic speech. He argued that he was a servant of the gods, fulfilling a divine mission to provoke thought and self-examination. He claimed that he never charged money, never claimed wisdom, and only sought truth. He even said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But he also challenged the jury. He exposed Miletus's contradictions. He mocked the idea that he was corrupting youth intentionally, and he warned Athens that silencing him would be a mistake. It was powerful, but it wasn't persuasive. The jury of 501 citizens found Socrates guilty. Then came the sentencing phase. Socrates was asked to propose an alternative punishment. He jokingly suggested free meals for life, like an Olympic champion. Eventually, he offered to pay a fine, but the jury chose death. Socrates was sentenced to die by drinking hemlock, a poisonous plant. He spent his final days in prison, surrounded by friends and students. Plato's Phaedo describes his calm acceptance, his final philosophical discussions, and his peaceful death. Socrates' death was a turning point. It exposed the fragility of democracy. It showed how fear and politics can silence dissent, and it immortalized a man who chose truth over survival. His student Plato went on to build an entire philosophical system around Socratic thought. Aristotle, Plato's student, continued the legacy. And today, Socrates is remembered not as a criminal, but as a martyr for reason. So was he guilty? By Athenian law? Yes. By history's judgment? No. Socrates didn't just die for philosophy, he lived it. And in doing so, he gave us a question that still echoes today. Are we living examined lives? Thanks for listening to 5 Minutes of History. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and share.